In case you're not aware, Schneider has a zero tolerance policy with regards to distracted driving. That means you cannot wear a headset when you're driving down the road, so you can't take phone calls either. They don't want you doing anything that's potentially distracting, which is why so many people who do content creation and they're Schneider employees, if they have worn a camera or put a camera even mounted to a window and then spoken to it, even if they don't look at the camera, and if they are driving at all, they've been fired. Well, this is because their no distraction policy is very strict, and that means that you're not allowed to take phone calls or do phone calls at all while you're driving. It just means that you are supposed to drive. Now, they do monthly training, and at their last monthly training thing, they did say, try to keep it to a minimum. I thought that was kind of weird because what they were referring to was adjustments to radio or something like that. And they said try to keep it to a minimum. But then their policy is actually none. So I'm assuming that's them saying that we know that you're probably going to do it, but try to keep it to a minimum anyway. Now, I don't take phone calls or do anything like that. My phone spins all day in airplane mode, actually. And then whenever I do a load integrity, load securement check, I always take the phone out of airplane mode just to make sure there's nothing going on. And what I do is I listen to audiobooks, or I will, sometimes I'll have like, because I subscribe to YouTube Premium, I have a list of videos that are basically like things that it will play, or it'll play music playlists or something like that. So basically it just plays videos. But what I end up doing is instead of wearing a headset or something like that, the stereo, the radio here in this truck does have Bluetooth, but it doesn't connect up to my phone. My phone does not see it. What if it's been disabled? Well, so instead what I do is I have a Bose Soundwave Companion. This thing here just goes on your shoulder. Now I've had it for a few years now, and it just has a couple speakers that go out here, and all you have to do to turn the thing on is press this button right there. It pairs to your phone. And so I can go in and hit play on my YouTube Premium and then jump behind the wheel and it will just play. Now, if I do this number, I am right now touching the volume up, the volume down, and the pause button. It is mindless. It is literally, if I'm driving, if as soon as I first start out, I want to make sure that I'm paying attention until I'm driving down the road and things are status quo. So I drive down the road, and as soon as I'm ready to start playing something, this shouldn't be an issue for Schneider, for me saying this. I literally go boom, and now I'm listening to something. If I do that and it doesn't work, I do it one more time. If it doesn't work there, guess what? I'm either going to have to pull over and figure out why it's not, or I am going to just do without. Depends on how long I go. Anytime there's anything, if I see red taillights come on down the road and people are stopping, I always do right there. Do exactly what you just saw me do. Boom, right there, and it's off. If I come to a stop on the interstate and there's traffic, boom, CB radio goes on. As soon as people start moving again, and and it looks like it's going to be moving along, boom, goes back off again. I showed you the CB radio in the past. Really, the cord that comes out there to the microphone, it's still inside. But if I want to, I have it into a science now. I touch the cable, and the first knob on the other side of that, that's the volume. Flip it, and it comes right on. And I know exactly how to do it. Turn it on. I have a sound background, so I know how to instantly turn a knob. Just as simple as right there. My finger automatically goes to that button, just because I know if this is the end of the thing, just reach right there, feel the buttons with all three of these fingers right there, and boom, the middle one is the pause, unpause. If it doesn't work the second time I press it, oh well. The reason I'm mentioning this is because I haven't actually had any phone calls come through and leave me voicemail messages that are critical. My DTLs don't call me. I have established myself with them as a communicator. I will send them an email. I will communicate with them. I don't require babysitting. I will reach out to them and just touch base. They require us to send in messages with our estimated time of arrivals, and they require us to go into the Pods app, what they call the Pods app, but it's actually a website. And you just fill in the information, tell them when you're going to get there, tell the DTLs that way that they see. If you do that and you stay on top of it, you will get constant loads. And I get constant loads. So I'm doing that correctly. I think this is the reason why when I first started with Schneider, I wasn't getting very loads very often, because I didn't understand what I was supposed to be doing. I did not know what I was supposed to know. So it's one of those things where over the course of time, I figured things out. It took a little while. Now I'm pretty much set in my ways. What I do very first is I trip plan. Let me tell you what I've been doing the past few days. So the last time you talked to me, I had to get back up in the morning and drive out to pick up a load at the place that I was that day. I got there at 6 a.m. He was a little bit slow to get going because he's by himself. He opened up. He had me fully loaded. I was out of there by 7. So he didn't get out there until I sent him a message at about 6:30 and said, because he told me they start serving at 6. So I said, okay. Make it sound like some, what time do you start breakfast at some restaurant? But he told me they start at 6. But then when he also required me to send him a message 5 hours in advance. So I preset text message that went out to him, so it automatically hit his phone at the exact right time. And then I got there because I was only like 6-8 minutes away, and that's if I drive slow. I got there and it was like 6:02, and got there and was hanging out in the back. After it was almost 6:30, I sent him a message, and he said, "Yep, my printer's been acting up here, but because I sent him the new trip sheet, his printer was acting up, but he came out, had me loaded in a few moments, and I had it secured. And I was ready to go down the road to my next location, which was originally it was like it said it was 24 miles, but as soon as I put it in the GPS, it said 54. So that means I got to do a load securement check in the first 50 miles. So what I will usually do for something like that is I will drive down the road. I will head out, start driving down the road. If I see a quick place before I get on the interstate, or sometimes in some of these places that you go, they will have a long driveway. They'll have you have to wiggle your way out in order to get out of the place. Or sometimes it's on a little back road in the middle of a industrial park or something like that. It takes a little while for you to get back to where you're going. So what I will do is I will drive there. I will start to drive, and I'll get like a mile, down the road, or maybe not even that much. But because they usually have speed bumps or something like that and multiple turns, I'll jump out before I hit the interstate. And it's usually been like 3 or 4 minutes, because you don't, since you start driving in some of these little areas, you drive around, or usually there's a gas station on the way. You just pull off real quick there. So that way my load securement check's done usually within the first 5 miles, something like that. And the rules say you just have to do it within the first 5 miles. I mean, it's not going to work if you pull up 10 feet and then do it. But if you pull up, if you pull up and go to a mile or something like that, wiggle around in the industrial park or something like that, you'll do your check, and then you'll make it to your first stop. When there's not a gas station or something like that, usually I will start to look for gas stations on my way to the place, because that's the place I'm going to probably want to stop, because most likely you're going to be taking the same route back to the interstate. And another thing I'll also look at is any place I can pull off that might be like another place where like semis will pull off. Sometimes you'll end up playing, and there's another pull off that goes up to a gate or something like that, along whatever. And sometimes it pulls off. There's a security gate, and so sometimes what I'll do is I'll pull up real quick, and I'll just tell the security person here, hey, I went the wrong way. I'm just gonna, and if you don't mind, I'm just gonna check my load, and then I'll be on the right way. And I jump out, check everything, pull, because I basically have a science. You grab the keys, you unlock the thing, you bang on the tires, you check your straps, you tighten as needed, and you jump back on the road. It takes 2 minutes, so it's not a big deal. And quite often you can do that. A lot of the places I like to stop are rest areas. So I will be driving down the road, and normally about 100 miles or so into my trip, I will start looking for rest areas. If I'm in a state that says next rest area is in 70 miles or something like that, I'll look at it and say 70 miles will put me over my next load security check. I'm going to go ahead and pull over now. So I go ahead and take that exit, pull off, and then I stop. Now, usually the biggest issue I run into is in the middle of the night, because there's a lot of people that will make a space wherever they possibly can. They'll end up jamming up all over the place. Actually, that's almost a good segue, because I should tell you what I've been doing. So after I went and picked up my load, I drove across to the other side of the Fort Worth area to pick up a container. I was there waiting, and about 20 minutes later, a guy that I had given the paperwork to and sent the message to, he says, your container wasn't picked up yesterday. I said, what do you mean it wasn't picked up yesterday? He said, well, the driver that went to pick up your container, the one that you're supposed to be taking, he ran out of hours, so he had to come back. And I said, well, y'all gonna get it today? He said, nope, it's got to be rescheduled. So I was like, So at this point, I called Schneider, talked to one of our DTLs, and he said, okay, well, when this kind of thing happens, we got to inform pods, so hang tight. I was like, okay. Well, it wouldn't normally be a big issue, except that pods hours are usually from 6 a.m. until 3. And the reason I say that's not normally a big issue is because at this point, sitting through rush hour traffic, it was probably about, what time was it by the time I got there? It was just before 9. And so this is just after 9 when I got this, when he told me this, and I called, and luckily it was only like a 5-minute wait to get into the DTL hotline. So I tell him, and he starts me on hanging tight. After about an hour, I call and say, hey, any updates? Nope. Okay, I'll get back to waiting. About 11 o'clock, my current trip sheet disappears, and it says it's been removed. I'm like, oh, they must be doing something. So at this point, I call the DTL hotline, and at the same moment, my DTL calls me, Audrey. So I say, hey, what's going on? She says, well, we've updated your trip sheet. So I said, so what am I doing? She says, oh, you're picking up there, and you're going to deliver. You have a couple of deliveries. We've added a stop. You're going to pick up a different container. We've added a stop. Or I forgot her exact wording. I'm like, okay, let me look at it real quick. I look at it. It's a pickup right where I am, but it's a drop-off in the Lancaster, Texas area, which is close to Dallas and almost 4 hours away. And at this point, I'm looking at it, and it's just after 11. I'm like, oh, crap. So it's like 220 miles to Lancaster from where I am. So I'm like, okay. So quickly I give him my trip number, and I'm like, just picking up a container. Luckily, it was just an empty 16-footer. And so it didn't take very long to secure. At that point, I pull out, and I end up realizing as soon as I pull out that I pulled out the wrong way, because my directions were taking me one way when I left there, and I was heading down I-10 going east. Straight across I-10, and then it was going to cut me up, I think on Interstate 59 going up towards Birmingham. But now that I'm going up to Dallas, it was going the opposite direction. So I said, GPS, navigate me, and I pull out the way that I thought it was going to take me back toward the interstate, and it says you were traveling in the wrong direction. I'm like, what? So I have to go down to an industrial park, turn around, and then I go back the other way. And as I'm driving back by, I'm like, oh, cool, look, I've gotten, a mile or two down the road in this industrial complex. Let me pull over real quick, and I do my load security check. After that, I'm good for 150 miles. So at this point, I hit the road. And I'm looking at this like, I need to hit the road to hit it hard. So I'm driving. I mean, you can't really drive aggressive in a truck because that's just totally wrong. You can't even go fast in a truck. What you can do is just not stop. So when I say driving hard, in the right lane, because the speed limit is like 80 miles an hour when you're driving in Texas, and the truck's governed at 65, so it's not like you're driving like a fool. You get cut in and out of traffic or anything. You just hit their right lane, just going down the road. And then when I see the first rest area, pull over, do my load security check, get right back on there. Make it up to the Lancaster location. I pull in there. I'm the last truck they're letting into the gate. It is 2:54. And I'm like, just dropping off that last one in the back. And he says, you're good then. And so I go to the back. I jump out of the truck because they're futzing around back there, loading up somebody. So I just pull up, and I know where I'm going. I've been there before. So I hit the parking brake, put it in neutral. I jump out and run to the inside, because they require you to go inside the office, which is around the corner behind this wall. And then you have to go up the stairs and go inside. So I parked the truck over on the side, and then ran in there. Gave him my paperwork, came back out, and the guy was looking at me. He was obviously wanting to go home, and he's like, you can't park here. And I'm like, and honestly, I didn't know that. It looked like it was out of the way. But then he says, the truck's coming down from the other direction. They can't make that wide turn. And that's when I looked at it and I said, makes sense. Good thing I was only in there for like 3 or 4 minutes because I ran. Either way, all I had to do was turn right and back straight in, broke the straps. He had it, and I was on the road. And I was probably total going inside and back out, breaking the straps and stuff like that. It was all of 12 minutes, including me putting it back in and checking the load and getting back on the road. It did not take me very long at all to break those straps. And he was sitting there watching me. As soon as I backed up the truck, I literally pulled to the right and back, did a straight back. And he had positioned himself. He was right there, and I just jumped out and broke the straps. And that only takes like 3 minutes, including getting out of the truck and getting the bar, the winch bar and stuff. So at that point, I was happy. Now, I dropped that load, but I had to pick up the next morning in Garland. So that was annoying because I couldn't just head out. So pods, when they told me to hang tight, I had to hang out for 2 hours. And this is during their 9 hours of operation. It took me 3 hours to get there. It was 2 hours wait and a few extra minutes to get my load and whatever. And it was almost 4 hours to drive. And I was looking at it saying, please allow me to get there. Please let me get there. It's just south of Dallas. Luckily, it was a speed limit ride. There was no real road construction. Actually, I take that back. The only road construction they had dropped it from 80 down to 65. So I didn't have an issue. Then when I picked up my pod the next morning in Garland, I hit the road. Now, something kind of interesting? They say pull down and make a U-turn and come back because they didn't have a sign that said where you're supposed to go. Normally they'll put a sign there that says where this is your way in, or it makes sense. This way you pull in, and it could be load right or left side. Doesn't really make you don't really know. So anyway, by the time I got that pod and I was out of there, it was just before 7. It was 6:45-ish. He was by himself and he had it pretty tight. So, and by that I mean he was by himself, but he had all my pod was on the first truck that was in the day previous. It was still loaded up on the truck. So he had to unbury them all, bring them all out. Part of the reason I had to U-turn around, and then he had to unbury the trucks, and then he offloaded me and loaded me up, and I was on the road. I was out of the Fort Worth area on I-30 before rush hour, which was nice. I had a little bit of traffic, but not bad. And I had already not tripped out, but I had already planned out on my whiteboard here. I had already planned out 4 different truck stops I could stop at, depending on when I got out of there. So if I got out of there by about 6:45, I could probably, and if I ran into traffic, which I ran into a little bit, I was able to make it to my very last stop. So I stopped, made it where I was hoping to be able to get to, which was actually, I thought it was kind of optimistic. But still, I planned on it. I planned on myself being there with about 30 minutes to spare. And I ended up getting there with about 25 minutes to spare. Now, in this particular area of 30, there's a lot of truck stops. So if I wasn't able to make it to that one, I was going to be able to make it to another one. So I knew I wasn't going to run out of hours. But when I stopped, I did my post trip, and I came back in and I shut it down. How you can go over your 11 or 14 hours as long as you're not driving the vehicle anymore. And you're allowed to go over your 70 hours also as long as you do not drive the vehicle. Same thing. I actually had 3 minutes and like 35 seconds left on my 70-hour clock by the time I shut it down. So I got about 200 miles down the road. I was very happy. Well, happy as I could be. Because of the delay pods put on me, they basically added 2 stops, which I could not do the same day, and they added about almost 200 miles to my drive, and they delayed me 2 hours, which is why I wasn't able to do all my drives. So, or my deliveries that day. Because if so, I could have shut down that day. If I could have, that first day that I drove up from Dallas, I would have loved to have dropped off, or from Houston up to Dallas. I would have loved nothing more than to get to Lancaster, pick up in Garland, and then been done. And then I just drive out of the city, and then as soon as I was done my 34, I could head out. But you see, the thing is, driving for that 5 hours or 6 hours, whatever it happened to be, in order for me to do that, there's a little bit over that because I had that 6 a.m. pickup, and then so 6. When was it? Yeah, it was just before 6, and then I shut down just before noon. So it was about 5 hours, 5.5 hours, something like that. Not a long day. Now, the reason I'm mentioning this is because if you shut down, you have a 10-hour. If you do a 34-hour reset, you shut down for your 10 hours plus 24 hours. So the fact that I had to do those deliveries in the Dallas area was annoying to me, because that meant that my shutdown day wasn't going to be when I planned on it. And my deliveries that were supposed to be on Monday weren't going to happen, and they were due on the the Monday. So I ended up telling them I was not going to be able to make it. I was going to have to be there the 26th, because I have not been late to any of the jobs that I've done. I've only been there early, as many as 2 days early. The deliveries I did today were there a day early. The deliveries I got tomorrow, those are going to be there a day early. Actually, they're going to be there 2 days early, and then and then I have to drive someplace else, and it's farther. It's 500 miles away, so that will be the next day. That will be 1 day early. Okay. So anyway, I was able to make it to Texarkana, Arkansas, and I shut down. And I was a bit frustrated that I really wished I could have been halfway through my reset by then. That way, I could have made that delivery on time. I knew that that if I was going to drive and try to make up some time, since it was just before noon, if I did my shutdown for 10 hours plus 24, I would be available to go as early as like 10 p.m. Okay, so what I did is, after my reset, I got up in the morning, left Texarkana, Arkansas. And it was a Sunday morning, late Friday night, early Sunday morning. And I drove through Casino Land and everything like that. Drove straight across Arkansas and then Tennessee. That's it. And I got to Knoxville, Tennessee. Usually my last stop before I get to, before when I look at my time and I know that I have like 2 hours, hour and a half, something like that left, I have to do a load security check there anyway, so I go ahead and check to write down some truck stops, and I look at my phone real quick while I'm stopped and figure out a good truck stop to stop at, and usually do that times 3 or 4 depending on where I am. In the Knoxville area, there's a lot of truck stops, so I looked at that and I said, I'm not going to have a problem. There's like 3 or 4 Pilots and Flying J's over there. There's Loves all over the place. There's a TA, whatever. So anyway, I stopped. I drove and there was no traffic, so I drove until I had about 20 minutes left on my time. Actually, it was a little bit over that. It was just under half an hour, and then I stopped at the Pilot, but that Pilot was full because it's a very small lot. But I would do it to the other side of the exit, and I knew that was a big one because it's a TA. I stopped there for the night. And the next day I went to bed and was intending on driving overnight from Sunday night until Monday morning. I wanted to see how early I could try to get to where I was going in Middle River, Maryland. I drove starting just after 10 p.m. and had no traffic. It was nice. Just smooth sailing, but I started to get tired. I did start to get tired. So when it came down to my 30, taking my 30-minute break, I ended up actually having to stop for a little bit. I had to stop for half an hour. It took my 30 minutes where I jumped in the sleeper to take a nap because I was tired, and I stopped at a rest area, and so I stopped there, took a quick nap, and that just got me ready to go for it was the second half of the day, because I stopped at about 5.5 hours in. So I happened to stop at a rest area And they happened to have a guy, as I was pulling in, I saw him pulling out of a space. I'm like, oh, good. So I pulled into that space, and that's where I took my nap. I take that back. It wasn't 5.5 hours. And it was closer to 7, because I remember seeing, when I got up, I remember seeing the sun was coming up. So it must have been. And then at that point, I went ahead and I went ahead and just checked the truck again, abbreviated pre-trip, I guess you could say. And then I hit the road again. And I was able to, because I ran into like no traffic, none at all, I was able to make my delivery till Middle River. And then I started heading up towards Cinnamon Sin. And unfortunately, I had to stop. I stopped at, what was it? Oh, someplace in New Jersey. It's barely across the Delaware Bridge. I stopped at this, at a Flying J with like 350 parking spaces. It was huge. Whatever it was big. Stopped there, and I really wish that I didn't have the HOS, because I would have loved nothing more than to make that delivery on time. But they're there for safety. They're there for a reason. So I went ahead, and at that point, I had said that was going to be where I was going to stop. I made it there, because I determined when I was in Middle River where I wanted to be and where I was going to shut down. And I looked at it and I said, you know what? I can't make it all the way to Cinnamon Sin from Middle River. It's about 100 miles. I can probably make it about half that. So I looked, and there was the Flying J was it was right at 60 miles away. And I was like, okay, I have the hours for that. So I went ahead and drove that way. No traffic. If I did encounter traffic in Maryland, northeast Maryland, and Elk Ridge, I think Maryland, were like 15 minutes before that. I could have stopped at either one of those also. And then there was more truck stops along the way too. New Jersey's pretty good about it. Or Maryland, rather, is pretty good about it. New Jersey is too in places. So anyway, shut it down. And at that point, I knew that I was going to have a long shutdown, because I had gotten there, and because of my 2 overnight drives, I'd gotten there around lunchtime, around noon. Anyway, so I parked, took a shower, chilled out and relaxed, because I knew I was going to have a long turnaround, a long layover, a long downtime. Because Cinnamon Sin doesn't open until 6 a.m. It's only like 40 some odd miles away. So I said, I will set my alarm for 4:30 a.m. I'll go and brush my teeth real quick inside, come back, do my pre-trip, and head out. And so I think I hit the road just before 5 a.m. because it didn't take me very long inside. And I already have all my clothes are set out the day before. So it doesn't take very long at all. But that was that. I got to Cinnamon Sin. They are a machine, a well-oiled machine. So did my drops, had another pre-assignment, which I was really happy about getting yesterday. Pre-assignment had me picking up today in Cinnamon Sin and dropping off. Now this was kind of fun. Dropping off in Hampton and then Chesapeake, Virginia. Now my drive, the GPS, was taking me straight down through Delaware on US 13 and across the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel. First of all, that is one of the 3 roads that you got to memorize these if you're working for a company that they don't want you taking. Not because it's an expensive toll, even though it's like $25, but because there are different reasons as to why they may not want you. Another one is the New Jersey Turnpike. They don't want, Schneider doesn't want you driving on without permission, because usually there's alternate ways of getting where you're going. So anyway, I contacted the DTLs and I said, my GPS is taking me down through the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel. I said, I know trucks can go over it, and if you want me to do that, that's fine. But if you don't, then the trip is going to have to increase by about 110 miles, because if I go around, I'm going to have to go around Philadelphia. I'm going to have to go around Washington, D.C., going around Maryland. That's the path you take down down Interstate 95 and the little side roads, the 695 or whatever, the little access roads, express routes and stuff. I'm going to have to drive around those. And I said, but if I do that and don't go the straight route, it's going to add 110 miles to my commute. So you either have a choice. You can either let me go through the Chesapeake Bay bridge tunnel, or you can do that, or you can increase my drive a little bit. And I sent the message in, and I was waiting to hear back from him, and I get a phone call. It says, "Oh, you made a good call." And the call that I made, I didn't realize how good it was, because the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel can just shut down. They can just decide not to operate it because, oh, it's not good weather. Let's just shut it down. Then you're at the bottom of this peninsula, and you have to go all the way back up and then around. So I was like, oh yeah, well, that's not good at all. So I didn't realize how good it was. They told me it was a good call. But mainly I was going to say is if I don't have your permission to cross over the bridge, then I need to be rerouted in a way that makes more sense for the mileage that I'm going to be paid. Because I don't want to end up driving someplace and get 200 and go 275 miles, 280 miles, whatever it is, and it paying me for that, but I can't go that direction. So the drive around is like 390 miles or 400 miles. I don't want to end up doing that and driving all the extra miles the way they want me to, because they're not going to pay a toll, and me end up doing more work and not get paid for it. So I told them, I said, something's got to give. You either have to give me permission to go through the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel, or you have to give me the miles to go around. And they said, definitely go around. I said, okay. I said, it's not going to be there that day, but don't worry, it's got like 2 extra days. Anyway. So I was pretty pleased, because what the DTL was able to do, which was very helpful, and this is Kevin. Kevin was very helpful. He's a knowledgeable guy, and I was very happy that he got the message when he did. He was able to call me. And the reason why is because what he did is he said, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add you a stop. And it was a stop at the place I am right now, Flying J, in Ruther Glen, Virginia. So by him routing me there, it adds it to my work route. Because it adds it to my work route, it pays me for it. So it was a good solution. It was a very good solution. The company, if they want me to drive that way, which makes sense to not send me over a very tempo, because right now when I'm recording this, Tropical Storm Ophelia, which was in the Maryland, New Jersey area, was September 25th and 26th, 2023. How do I know that? Because I was driving in it. Just the outskirts of it. It wasn't terrible, but it's been very rainy. So if you look out my window right now, it's a bit rainy. It's because we're on the outskirts of it, and we're still feeling it a little bit. I mean, it's technically gone away, but it's still misty. It's still raining every single day when you're driving. Not a big deal. As long as you go slow. I mean, you can't just barrel down the road at 65 miles an hour. You got to take it slower on rainy days. I mean, some people will fly past you, but, you know, I don't want to do that. I'd like to actually get home and see my family. And I do not have that confidence to do that. Even when I get the confidence, I can't imagine myself doing it. Because, I mean, I guess you could say it's not really confidence, because I feel like I can control the truck if I'm driving down the road. I'm not worried about when it suddenly puts concrete barriers on either side and you're driving down this. I'm not worried about hitting them. What I'm more worried about in this truck, and this happened to me just the other day, is I'm driving down the road and all of a sudden another critical event happened. I'm like, what? What happened? Because I was in a construction zone and I was just straight down the road. There was nobody. This is in the middle of the night. There was nobody in front of me. I mean, like way, way, way down. I could see him way down there. And I look in my mirror. There's nobody behind me. And I'm driving the speed it tells me to go. So all of a sudden it says critical event. It makes this little vibration noise and whatever. And I'm like, what critical event? And I'm like, I'm in my lane. And at this point, it was distracting to me because it does this. I'm like, what did it note that I didn't see? I have no idea what the thing saw. I mean, all I know is that I was driving straight. There was no curve or anything like that. It wasn't turning left or right, but the truck is the truck. Whatever it sees in front, it's going to get spooked by or something. And it could react. Luckily, it was just a critical event, and that critical event was just, I guess it saw something? I don't know. But that critical event, maybe it wasn't in the middle of the night. I seem to have a memory of it now being dark. But anyway, so as soon as I came to a stop for the day, I called in and I said, hey, he gave me a critical event when I was driving down the road. What was that about? And he was like, well, it doesn't show up on our system for a few days. So he said a critical event is the initial warning system. It's like there's already a warning system, but if it starts to think that there's something wrong or it's going to have to slam on the brakes or something, it will throw at least a critical event. It may be a major event or something like that, or slam on the brakes with the hepatic. Never can say that, can I? Whatever it happens to be. It vibrates as it slams on the brakes. It does a real quick thing. So I guess it's a part of ABS. And then it will warn you. And it's done that a couple of times to me when I wasn't going to actually hit the car in front of me. I was just slowing down, and it just, one of them, if you recall, was like I was going 7 to 9 miles an hour, and when it stopped me, the car in front of me was like 30 feet away. It's 30 minutes away. That'd be a malfunctioning system. So anyway, I said, so why did the system do that? He said, and he says, you said you were in a construction zone. Maybe it saw something. He says they've had boxes that had been in the road hit that sensor, even though the truck would drive right over it, no problem. It'd been just a box that was in the road, and all of a sudden the system freaks out and does a critical event or something like that. He said that somebody was driving on a mountain in Virginia or West Virginia, something like that. He was going around a curve, and the truck happened to see a slow-moving truck that was in the access lane that was pulling off. And so as he was making that turn, it happened to get onto that truck, and it instantly put the brakes on and made him stop on that downhill. I was like, that's dangerous. For a system to do that, that's dangerous. If it puts on the brakes without mercy on a steep incline, going downhill, that means you could get rear-ended. Oh, that suddenly made me nervous, because imagine a truck that weighs what it weighs. You're trying to safely go down a hill, and suddenly it decides you have to slam on the brakes because you're going to hit something. If you're going down a hill and it locks the brakes, the trailer could kick out, and you have no chance of recovering that. If it starts to lock up, and because what you're supposed to do if the trailer starts to lock up, then what you're supposed to do is recover, get control of the trailer. You're supposed to release the brakes so that way the trailer will go back behind you, and then put on the brakes. Because if it swings all the way around, it's jackknifing. If the truck slams on the brakes and it causes you to jackknife on an incline, no less going downhill on a turn, you could cause some major damage. That to me sounds like the system that's in the International LT or trucks in general. It's a computer. It's not a perfect system. That's something to be aware of if you're driving out there, that these things are basically computers. Computers don't always make sense. They don't always act right. So be overly cautious. You already know you're not supposed to use Jake brakes and stuff like that when you're going down hills in the rain. That means you're going to have to be going extra slow. You're going to have to just downshift and just be easy on the brakes. Especially if it's a steep incline and it's going on for a mile or two or whatever, it'll 6 to 8% grade. You're going to have to go slow, because if you use the Jakes, that can cause you to lose control. Lose control of your trailer or the truck in general. So anyway, there I am. I'm shut down. What I have tomorrow is I'm going to get up and I'm going to head out by about 4 a.m. The pod's location I'm going to tomorrow, for whatever reason, their 2 phone numbers are disconnected or no longer in service. Please check your number and call again. I mean, I'm going off of what it said back in the 80s, but it told me when I called, it says, you have reached a number that's been disconnected, or no, I'm like, disconnect. Try the other number. No longer in service. Great. So this is a pause location with no phone number. So I'm going to be frustrated, even though there's nothing I can do. If I arrive at 6 a.m. and some of these locations, they just don't work. They don't load up semis at 6 a.m. And you can't take it out on them because they have, reduced hours and they have things that they have to do. You don't take it out on the customers anyway. I can be internally frustrated, but don't take it out on a customer. So anyway, I'm going to get up, I'm going to get there, and then I have another drop off about 24 miles away from that. And then after I drop those other 2 pods off, I will be picking up 4, going to Richmond, Virginia, about 100 miles away. And then I'll be dropping off those and picking up 2 or 3 more 16 footers to go to Atlanta, which is like 500 something miles. Not a big deal. That's good. What I need to do is I need to get out of the Richmond area before lunchtime, before noon. That way I can hope to get down the road, and that way I can hope to get in the big span of a gap between major cities before you get to the Raleigh-Durham area, or if I get there early enough, get through it. So I'm really hoping that first location I go to tomorrow morning does allow me to get in there at 6. And hopefully they can load me up, because I'll be to the next location before 8, and then I can load up that other. I can load up the other 4 pods, get those secured, get down the road, and hopefully offload in Richmond and get down the road, because I would love nothing more than to get all the way a good ways down to Atlanta and then shut down. If it gets too late in the day, then I'll shut down because of traffic. Now, if I wanted to, I could drive all the way to the Schneider OC in Charlotte. That's an option too. I've thought about it, because you can always park at one of the OCs and do your shutdown. The problem is, I don't want to run into traffic. If I run into traffic, it delays me. So what I would rather do is not have traffic to deal with. So if I start to run into traffic as I'm doing my drive out of Richmond, I'll go ahead and shut down. I'll go ahead and find a truck stop. I'll pull over, do my post trip, do my 10 hours. That way the next day when I get up, I can hit the road hard in the middle of the night, hopefully, and get most of the way down to Atlanta before, first thing in the morning. We'll see what time I'm making. May end up having to adjust my ETA. We'll see. That is the plan as of right now. Driving down the road. Trying to get it done, because as of right now, some areas of the country are starting to get kind of cold. I do have some home time coming up too. So I'm looking forward to, since I put in my 2-week notice, not for, leaving the company, but I put in my 2-week notification, I guess it would be, for home time. Hopefully that means that I'll get my home time very soon. And next week. Hopefully that means I'll be arriving back. I'll do my delivery on Monday, and I'll be home Monday night. And then what I would like to do is I would basically have my 4 days at home, because technically that's a work day. So it'd be Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then I'll start work on with hopefully a pre-assignment on Friday, so I can pick up on Saturday. And then hopefully you'll be a ways away, because I don't want to end up being someplace, would love nothing more than deliver on Sunday, but there's nothing there to deliver to. So send me out to Texas. Send me out to someplace that's going to be farther away. Send me to Cinnamon Sin again. Actually, if it's the beginning of it's starting to get cold, send me out west. Send me up north, and then across the northern areas of the country, because before it starts to freeze, before it starts to snow, I'd love to see it again. It'd be nice to see it a second time before it starts icing over. Anyway, there you go. That's the first update that you're going to be watching in the year 2024. There you go.